This is San Francisco.
Welcome to San Francisco, where there are a lot of conservative forces that keep undermining the existence of one of the only colleges in the US that is free if you have a San Francisco address. I mentioned this when City College was the focus of the episode with Adele Fail Carpenter a month back. How every college in the UC system and the CSU system was tuition free if you lived in California up until the 1970s. In the 1960s, colleges had been a breeding ground for anti-racist, anti-war, and pro-labor protest movements that threatened the powers that be. The government of Ronald Reagan in particular pushed back, setting up this false narrative that the state was too poor to fund college the way it had for decades. And the administrations of these colleges seem to exist to carry on Reagan's legacy. So even when the economy is doing really well, as it supposedly is now, the administrators almost always push this idea that there is no money and we need austerity budgets, like always on the verge of going broke. And that's what happened with David Martin, who said he will be stepping down as chancellor next year. Basically, he laid off a bunch of teachers and blamed it on having to balance the budget. That didn't really make sense, though, and I'm simplifying the way it works, but community colleges get money from the state for every student that is enrolled, and cutting teachers means cutting classes, and in recent semesters you had all these students that couldn't fully enroll now because there weren't teachers to teach certain classes, including classes that were prereqs required to get into a major or to graduate. I talked to James Tracy, who teaches in the Labor and Community Studies department, about the strategy behind Free City College, this campaign in 2016, and how it was an example of the left being aggressive and getting what it wanted, where, a lot of the time it can feel like a lot of the most visible causes on the left are always about being on the defense and saving whatever's the status quo. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the Free City campaign came into existence.
Yeah. Well, it came from three different sources, really. So one is the first accreditation fight that went on, and our union, American Federation of Teachers 2121, did a really remarkable job at saving City College, right? And they did it by really centering how important City College is for working class people, especially working class people of color in San Francisco, and reaching out directly out to organizations and building a coalition to do it, right? So it was definitely good social unionism and labor and community coalition building. And, there was points where, certainly points where even very optimistic people thought that City College was going to be either done, privatized, or shrunk to the point where they could strangle the baby in the bathwater, so to say. But they won, and that was fantastic. Kind of shortly thereafter, we saw that whenever there's the work is never done, right? So the Civic Center campus, which was really important campus in the Tenderloin, it's right there on Eddy and Polk, was shut down overnight, right? Because of ignored seismic problems. Those problems had been well known for years. It wasn't any great mystery or anything like that. And what happened is that the administration just thought people would just say, okay, great, we don't want to work in a building that's falling down, go ahead and cancel all our classes. And I don't think they expected that there would be any type of fight back. But because of the massive amount of community-based organizations that are centered in the Tenderloin, and that their members used that campus for ESL, for adult basic education. There was a big pushback that was initially led by La Voz Latina and Community Housing Partnership, but also because the issue was so widely felt and deeply felt at the same time, You were even able to bring in small business people to sign on, and even the bid, right? Even the business improvement district that is oftentimes at odds with progressive forces. I guess that's an understatement. They were completely supportive and wonderful, right? And it was one of those moments where you could unite a bunch of people in a short amount of time. I was the lead organizer at Community Housing Partnership at the time. And we, of course, we let Jane Kim's office know about it and alerted them to it and said, well, there's a lot of issues going, a lot of important issues. You have to get 100 people out onto the streets. And we actually ended up getting 500 people out in the streets in like 3 days, right? It was like the easiest organizing, or at least mobilizing, that I've ever done in my entire life. You made multilingual flyers. You went and talked to the people and invited them. People were there, right? And it was a march from the closed down building to City Hall. And that really, really fortified Jane Kim's office to ally, but also all of City Hall, where they put a lot of pressure on City College to find a place, right? So they reopened right there on Market Street. I believe the address was like 1183, right there by UN Plaza, which has shut down now, right? Which is sad because I think that that area certainly needs the presence of a city college. But, it was a victory that held for like 3 or 4 years. And what it did is it broadened out that coalition, right? Built upon that coalition that AFT had so skillfully built around there. And there was this conversation, I believe the person who came up with the idea for Free City was Elisa Messer, but I'm not sure. But the conversation was like, well, why don't we go on the offensive, right? We're really good at saving things, and we've saved a campus, we've saved a college. Well, let's do something big, right? Because success is the best revenge. So Free City, I think, it was a bit of it was like warm-hearted revenge for having to fight these defensive fights and wasting our time. And together, Community Housing Partnership and AFT were the two major pillars of the campaign. And it became a kind of a multi-tactic campaign where you had, at some point, some forces being deployed to do more community action tactics, right? Going to City Hall and bird dogging the supervisors who were on the fence. And then a very traditional electoral campaign to get the money to pay for it. And what I think was really nice about Free City coming out of this is that it was actually funded by progressive taxation, right? And we live in a city where oftentimes, like, if we want to get something good done that benefits human beings, like building more affordable housing, it's often done through like very market friendly methods like bonds and things like that. And I think good people could have an argument over whether paying for public things through bonds is an acceptable compromise or not. But I don't think you can debate that just going and taxing the rich is a far superior method to that. I should say, as a footnote, showing how slippery the slopes are between local organizing and national conditions, is that a lot of it localized the conversation around free college that was going on in the middle of a presidential campaign, right? Whether you were Bernie Sanders, Hillary, or Donald Trump, everybody was taking a position on it, and it was part of the national conversation. And I think that we knew at the time that that wasn't ever going to happen on the national level, or not ever, but certainly not in 2016. We were going to all of a sudden see like student debt forgiveness and tuition-free public colleges there, which is the goal. So we localized it and prefigured a big victory. The saddest thing was I remember that we were basically doing very good, accurate vote projections. We knew that we were going to win Proposition W, which is the thing that funded the thing, get all excited, go run down to Slim's where the victory party was, and everybody was crying. And I was like, why is everybody crying? We'd literally been like skipping down 11th Street, and it was because Donald Trump had just been elected, right? So, I think that what we did was a pretty amazing victory, right? But it is a progressive victory in one city, and we need to certainly take these type of efforts nationally.
Yeah, it's like a dream come true for an organizer on the left, all of these things coming together. Also, this idea of, instead of just reacting to the things again and again, just reacting and, as you said, like, saving City College from cuts, that you all were able to take this moment where you had saved the Civic Center campus at the time and seeing that there was still more energy to push beyond just reacting, of just saving the thing. That is super inspiring. I was wondering if you could also talk about what was at stake when Balboa Park, which is the largest campus for City College, uh, what was at stake when that fight over what was a parking lot? There were several moments in the past 10 years when it could have gone left and it could have become market rate housing. And now it is to become affordable housing, 100% affordable, although some of that affordable housing is set aside for people making above 100% of the area median income, which we could talk about. But at several points, yeah, it could have gone in a very different direction because there were some forces who wanted to see that parking lot become straight up market rate housing.
Mm-hmm. The Balboa Park thing was like we had a crew of people that were so concerned with Balboa Park. Without that pressure, you wouldn't have seen the high level of affordability. And there's other factors as well, but without the pressure that came from not just City College folks, but even the more conservative neighborhood groups would raise affordability as a demand, not because they actually want to live next to middle and working class people and everything, but they thought, if they raised that demand, it could, somehow derail the project. Well, actually,
Good.
yeah, like an unreasonable demand could, or whatnot. But it definitely put pressure to make it much more beneficial. Like in my vision of affordable housing is much more closer to like social housing in ways. It's like, yeah, I want massive amounts of working class housing built that include people coming out of the streets up to nurses, right? I don't want nurses displaced, even though they may be like 120 AMI, right? That's like I
Yeah.
want nurses to live here, and firefighters and teachers, although most of us are now qualify for the lower income
I know, right?
because of austerity. But so it was, it improved the outcome there, all that resistance and agitation there. So, hats off to it.
Yeah, yeah. Could you talk a little bit about who in the Free City fight, who did you come up against? Who was like some of the major opposition to that fight?
The surprise part was that there wasn't a ton of opposition, hardcore opposition. There were people that withheld their support. Merely wasn't, London Breed weren't excited about it, but there wasn't a ton of organized opposition. In fact, I think that the only people that took out like ballot arguments against Proposition W were like the Republicans and the Libertarians. And like, given the Trump candidacy at the time, I was like, please, can you take out some more? It actually really helped us a lot. People like Elisa, who worked on the implementation of it, can talk about how hard it has been to get the regulatory agreements and get the details, because you pass the legislation and then the Free City Commission had to negotiate with the campus to just do all the technical things of how you transfer money from one and what the conditions were and who could be included or excluded because of this, what was the role of past student debt, things like that. And so that's really where the opposition and the roadblock came into, is like coming up with the regulations that interpret and implement the legislation.
Did you have any sense as W passed? There was a moment when then Mayor Ed Lee was like, okay, all this money, it's in the general fund, and I could take it, I could put it into City College, which it was intended for, according to the vote that passed, or I could take it and put it into, something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the threat. And if it wasn't for the follow-up legislation that happened, I think there were two pieces of it. I mean, it's not going to be a threat for like another 20 years. There's been trailing legislation that has made Free City a thing for the next 2 decades. And so it's safe for a while. But because of the way that tax law is passed. If we named the purpose as that this has to go to city college in the ballot measure, it would need a supermajority. So the strategy was, and it worked, but by the skin of its teeth, was to have the board of supervisors pass a resolution saying if a piece of legislation ever looking like Prop W were to ever pass, we would use it for city college, which is like a pretty flimsy thing because the way that San Francisco is, the mayor has a lot of power, right, over the budget. But again, I think it goes back to that block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood coalition where it became a political liability to go against City College in that way and go against students. And so there's certainly a lot of compromises in it there because you never win everything that you want when you're doing a campaign. I always tell one of my students who's really upset about all these compromises, like, no, these are your opportunities to continue our work. So, get busy.
Yeah. It helps that, free education is a really popular thing. What would you say to people at other community colleges in California that would like to see something like Free City happen locally?
Well, build broad-based political support because anything you win can be taken away from you if you don't have that. Um, Use it as an opportunity to build the long-term relationships beyond that campaign. And public education is that one of those things that is a really powerful tool to shift the debate, right? Because even more conservative people will listen around education, right? And community colleges are certainly used by everybody, right? Got my Tuesday night class. I got a spread from left to right for sure in that class, and that's part of the beauty of it. So you have all these opportunities to talk about the value of the commons, the value of the public sector, the value of working class education. I get worried because I'm super excited that Peralta has been free for 2 semesters now, but it's a pilot program. And it was passed because people on the board of trustees of Peralta thought, hey, let's try this and see if we can pay for it. Our enrollment's down, maybe it'll bring in some money from the enrollment numbers. Powerful people making the right choice, but without that base, it could go away in a second, right? We have no idea. But it is exciting to see something that you worked on, like have those ripple effects, shifting things. I don't even have to do any work for it.
It's amazing as a precedent. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the department that you teach in at City College, Labor and Community Studies, which is certainly not offered at every college. How did this unique department come about?
Welcome to our new office. I'm just putting all my Just Seed stuff up. If you're ever looking for an obscure labor book that's out of print or not in your library, it's probably over here. Come
Sweet.
on over. Labor and community studies is part of a really long tradition of worker education. I think about the worker schools in the 1930s that came up, like the Wobbly School and Highlander. I situated in that because what we're here to do is to provide training in political education for people who want to become organizers. And when I say organizer, I don't mean just paid. I mean, I love it when my students get a job somewhere, but it's also for people who want to take more leadership in their communities. Tenant council members in supportive housing have been a big thing. They have people from O'Hara's Unitas taking our classes. So we provide a certificate in labor and community organizing. And we're part of a social justice associates of arts with an emphasis in labor studies. We obviously have an organizing 101 course. We have Who Built America, what kind of people's history of the United States framework. We have a class that's all around the history of housing politics and policy from the 1930s up now. But the basic thing is it just goes back to like my approach to this job. And I've only had this chair for 2 years now and been part-timing here since 2015. Is that the left can talk a really, really good game around inclusion and wanting everybody at the table and say all the right words and acronyms, but if you're not making everyday people feel comfortable with participating, the room is always dominated by people who are already walking in the most empowered and feeling themselves, as the song goes, right? And so making sure that everybody who wants to participate is armed with outreach skills, meeting facilitation skills, and some historical and political examples just makes for a better movement, right? It just means that you can have people with GEDs sit down next to people with PhDs and figure out how to make a movement.
Well, much appreciated. You have a couple of books that I definitely recommend, and we'll link in the show notes. And we'll see you around town soon.
Yeah, anytime.
Sad Francisco is produced by Toshio Moronic and Caitlin Wood. And if you go to patreon.com/sadfrancisco, you can get to all of our past episodes and show notes, and also throw us some cash as well if you got it. See you next time in Sad Francisco.